Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Coolbaugh. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Alisha Klapheke. How are you doing today, Alisha?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Great. I got that out. I was like wanting to cough the whole time, but it's like my eighth interview.
That's the world right now.
Yeah, I was like coaching this week. We had our first week of summer school. My wife's like, man, my voice doesn't normally sound like this. So I think people will be able to hear it, the previous episodes, and then probably like 7 of them in like a 2-month period, and all of a sudden you'll hear my voice at the end. But yeah, well, I'm so glad that I could get you on. I absolutely love when I actually saw. Just before we get started, I just wanted to say that I did see your advertisement for your page on Facebook, and Facebook knows me so well. So I immediately liked your page. So I was so glad that Facebook recently has been sending me more and more authors.
Well, it's nice when it actually works, right?
Yeah. And then the nice thing is I just wanted you to know that this is what's happening, and the audience too, because I haven't mentioned this yet. But so with their algorithm, what happened was I liked your page, and then I sent you a message. I started checking out your products, and then I actually went over to Amazon, and then I came back, and the next thing that happened was it sent me. I noticed as I was scrolling, it sent me 3 other authors with this in the same genre. So
cool.
It was really cool to see that and you were all pretty similar, in terms of, genre. So I sent the other 2 ladies, a message as well. And I actually have one of them coming on, possibly the other one, as well in the next couple of weeks. But it was just cool to me that, it was clumping you together. And it hasn't done that before. It'll send me, just random people, and I'll check it out. And I'm like, it's not really my thing, in terms of reading or, or whatever. Or in terms of, maybe interviewing at certain times, but not generally. But it was just really cool. I just wanted you to know that it was really cool to have it pop up, and then, you were associated with some of these other authors. So
yeah,
hopefully it's vice versa, right? Where, if I liked one of the other authors, hopefully it's also doing the same thing and putting your advertisement in on other people on the page as well. So that's the first time I've ever seen that. So I'm like crossing my fingers for you. So I'm really hoping that they continue to do that, because it made it a lot easier to find, authors of the same, genre, and, relatively the same niche. So
yeah,
that's
cool.
Awesome. Yeah, it was really cool. First time I've ever seen that. We'll start right with that first question there. It's a fan favorite. Actually, a fan created it, gave it to me early in season 1. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
So I started writing when I was a kid, like a lot of us. Like I was reading all the time and total nerd dork over here. And I wrote as a kid, and then I kind of gave it up trying to be like a serious person, like I'm a serious business major, and I got my business degree. And anyway, long story longer, I went in like the trad route first. So I queried, and I got an agent, and I shopped manuscripts, but everything moved so slow.
Oh, yeah.
And there were a lot of like, we want you to write something like this. How about something like this? And I'm like, okay, I don't know if I'm a bit of a rebel, or I just really don't like people telling me what to do. Like,
I get that.
And my husband and I already run a business. We run a martial arts studio.
Oh, that's
and so
cool.
I kind of know about being an entrepreneur and running a small business anyway. And I'm like, I started listening to Joanna Penn's Creative Pen podcast every day when I was exercising. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So I went into indie publishing from there, and I have loved it ever since. It's been great. I do have some Trad Pub audio, but that's it.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's excellent. I'm sorry. What style of martial arts?
We teach MMA, mixed martial arts. So like Thai kickboxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Krav Maga. And awesome. Yeah, so I know I don't look like it, but I beat up things a lot.
I get that a lot for my students too. I do taekwondo. I mean, I have 2 black belts in taekwondo.
Nice.
About to have my black belt really soon, when I can go back to the same day classes, as they have a new schedule. So it's summer. For Washoe karate, I'm about 2 ranks away right now. I have my blue belt in judo. I'm testing for my brown as soon as I can heal my back up fully this year. Hopefully. I almost had my blue belt in jiu-jitsu. I was just shy from getting hurt. And then the pandemic happened. Yeah. And then just
Jujitsu is a
recently,
lot.
yeah. I'm like prepping for it again. Probably the one I'll finish out with that in judo. But I just started Jeet Kune Do actually, again after like a long hiatus, and yeah, it's definitely helping me get looser and things like that. But people are always like, why don't you just write about martial arts? I'm like, it's just, I was like, when you do something for so long, it feels like work, you know? And I'm like, I like that to
Yeah, I know
still feel,
exactly what you mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I'm
but
just
I do
like,
like to have a lot of fight scenes. So I do
oh
use
yeah,
my
definitely.
experience in fight
Definitely.
scenes and
Yep.
stuff. So
Yep. Well, my friend's like, you should just have this monk and do this and that. I was like, no, I was like, I like to explore other fighting styles or weapon
mhm,
styles. You know, I said, you won't find me. Yeah, so you won't probably won't find me writing about somebody with a bow staff, you know, because that's mostly what I've done. I'm like, you'll probably
mhm.
find me with somebody with a spear because I haven't done a lot of spear and I like looking those things up and,
And
you know,
learning new
studying.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
exactly.
sure.
Yeah.
Research
Yeah.
is half the fun of writing, like to
Exactly. Yeah.
me.
Yep. I'm a history teacher and historian, so I just
Oh, I
it's
love
like,
history. I'm a
oh
huge
man.
history nerd.
Oh yeah. And I feel like it helps, you know, with martial arts too, you know, the two, it's like my friend, he's
Hmm.
like, oh, he's like, I'm so jealous. He goes, actually I was just talking to JCM Byrne about this. We had an interview last week and he's like, oh, I'm really jealous, you know, that you're a history teacher. Like you can literally just, he was like, world building must be pretty easy. I'm like, it generally does get a lot easier, you know, when you can do different things. But yeah, he's like, and a martial artist. He's like, I'm really jealous of, you know, that combination. And I started thinking about it more. I'm like, yeah, it does make writing fantasy a whole heck of a lot easier, you know,
For
just in
sure.
general. But yeah, that's super cool. Well, that's awesome. It's always fun to hear, you know, that you know, people are, you know, still excelling with schools and things like that, you know, especially
Yeah,
after the
it's
last
great. It's
couple of
very
years. So
rewarding.
yeah, that's
Oh
awesome.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
tough for a little while, but it's good now.
yeah. Well, I'm really glad. I was very disappointed. Yeah, my soapbox was just very disappointed that, you know, we did not take better care of, you know, instructors and gyms and things.
Mhm.
I remember like I was working DoorDash and I had another job and like a teaching job, and I was working DoorDash and I was making a lot of money, and my two of my old instructors were kind of struggling obviously, and I haven't been with them, either of them, in like 5 years, but they're just great people and do amazing
Mhm.
things. And I, you know, people had raised money on like Venmo and stuff. So I just like kept sending them money. So I'm really happy
Mhm.
that both of them were able
That's really
to, you know,
kind.
to make it through the pandemic. And they definitely helped me out both at very critical times in my life. So I was
Yeah.
very happy to, you know, to help them out. But
Yeah, you
yeah.
really see a lot of kindness come out in people. Like,
Oh yeah.
you wonder why we have to go through these challenges, but that's when you see people really rise to the occasion.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
we saw a lot of help from our
Oh, that's
people at
good.
the school too, which was really kind.
Oh, that's good. Good. Glad to hear. I always kind of expect it from the martial arts community though, because I feel like we have a much different
Mhm.
community, and that's why I do like you mentioned though, like with indie though, I do like the indie community though too, because you know, after hurting my back and not being able to do jujitsu, which like other martial arts are, you know, they have a similar, but like jujitsu in particular and judo, I feel
Yeah,
like
it's
there's,
tough on your back for sure.
yeah,
Hmm.
but I feel like it's such a tough sport that, you know, you just bond so much closer with the people
Yeah.
that do it. And I really needed something else, you know, in the meantime. And I feel like the indie fantasy and, you know, sci-fi community, just indie writing in general, you know, has really helped to fill that void. You know, I can,
Right.
you know, hang out with people at least on Zoom and stuff, or, you know, or
Oh yeah, I've met
chit
so
chat,
many
you know.
amazing people in this career. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and when I see them actually in real life, like
Yeah.
not just
Oh, it's
online,
so
you're like,
cool.
oh my God, you're real. Like,
Yeah, it's like a celebrity.
it is. I get
Yeah,
so
yeah.
excited. I recently just went to a conference in town, Utopia
Oh, that's
Con,
cool.
and got to see a couple of my really good
Oh,
author
that's
buddies, and we
cool.
roomed together and everything. And I was like
Oh,
poking their faces, like, you're real. Oh my
I'm
God.
so jealous. Like that's my wife. Like we had originally planned to go to the Comic Con, Toronto Comic Con. So Michael R. Fletcher like lives that way, and Dirk Asher lives in Ohio, and so they do the Wizard Warriors and Words podcast with Jed Hearn and Rob J. Hayes. Well, those two are, you know, they're closer to me. We're like a triangle, and we had planned on going to Toronto Comic Con and with some other people, and I was like, I'm gonna get to go with like five of my indie writing heroes, you know. And I can't remember if that was when Crystal Matar was going to or not. But I was like, oh, I was so excited. And then they closed the border again between, and it was like a
Oh,
2 hour drive for my work. I was like, oh no. So
oh,
I'm really, really excited now that, you know, things are hopefully evening back out. So this fall, my
for
wife's like,
sure.
my wife's like, so this fall you're gonna be gone that weekend. I was like, oh, I'm gonna be gone. I was like, I'm gonna be in
Yeah.
Toronto. I was like, you can come with, or or stay here. I said, but I'll definitely be gone. But yeah, I'm very jealous of that you got to go
Yeah,
do
it
that.
was wonderful. It's
Oh,
just
that's
you
awesome.
can't replace seeing people in real life,
Yeah, no,
face
I
to
agree.
face.
The podcast only gets me, only sustains me for so long. I have to
Right.
start talking to some people in person.
Yes.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, that's awesome. I didn't know that you had some of your audio traditionally published too. So that's really good to
Yeah,
know.
I kind of well, I feel like I was kind of teetering on burnout for a little
Mm.
while, and I felt like I needed to outsource it.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
so I talked to someone who had worked with Podium,
Mm.
and so they introduced me, and I've been working with them ever since. So they've
Oh,
done
excellent.
four of my books, I'm sorry, so far, and then there's a couple more that they're going to do for sure, and then we'll
Oh, cool.
we'll decide on the next series. But they've
Yeah,
been
yeah.
awesome to work with, like super kind and
Oh, I've heard that.
professional and
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful. And it's been really nice because I still get to make money off of it, but I didn't have any money out of pocket.
Oh,
And, they're paying me, and I don't have to do anything else.
yeah,
So
yeah,
at
yeah.
that point in time, with my mindset and what I was dealing with burnout, it was
Yeah.
very, very helpful. So
Oh, that's excellent. I it's funny that you mentioned that because I keep forgetting to ask my friend who really wanted to get with Podium. He was doing whatever he could. So I know in the fall he wasn't yet. So you have to remember to ask about that. But I know a lot of other people have said, that they've been, anybody that's worked with them has said, just stellar things. And I personally
yeah.
feel like that's how you should run a business. And
Hmm.
I'm sure we all know. So Paul S. Kemp, he wrote like the Everest Kale trilogy for Forgotten Realms and just so many
Hmm.
things, the
Yeah.
Hammer and Blade series. Um, he actually stopped me from signing with a vanity press probably about 10 years ago. And yeah, and I'm like,
I'm cheering for him, people
right,
who can't
yeah.
see me.
I am literally gonna thank him in my, when I get my first
I mean, they
sale.
have
I'm
their
gonna
place. Don't get me wrong, but
no, yeah, yeah.
not like
Well, I
that.
mean,
So.
this one in particular though, because he was like, let me talk to some people, because this is when Wizards of the Coast was still publishing Forgotten Realms novels. He's like, let me talk to some people. I just like randomly messaged on Facebook, and I couldn't believe he responded, and then he helped me out. He was like, yeah, he goes, he goes, who I talked to, they said it doesn't seem legit, and it turned out that they weren't. So I was just
Oh
so happy,
wow.
that
Yeah, you
somebody
dodged a
helped me
bullet
out.
on that one for sure.
Yeah, and and I'm not gonna say the company. I don't want to, make people upset or whatever, but it was a bigger one out in California. And they were trying to pose themselves as something different. So it's just nice, which I'm sure you've encountered people too. It's nice in our community to find people like Podium, who are
Hmm.
just, I don't know, just always, like you said, always so friendly, always so willing to help and put out a great product. I feel like, it's hard nowadays to still expect that from people.
Right.
Especially post pandemic. I feel like a lot of things have dipped, but I've heard nothing but even better things about Podium, since the pandemic. So it's good to know that you also had that experience. So
Oh yeah,
that's
they've
really
been
cool.
great. Their communication is great. I mean, I think the number one thing in any kind of business situation is just communication. If you're just
Amen.
communicating at a respectful level and
Yep.
doing it often enough, most problems will go away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Huh. Yeah, no, that's very, very true. Yeah, that's excellent. Well, I'm glad that's working out for you. That's really good to hear. Oh, for our audience, so what genres do you currently write in, and why did you choose those?
I'm currently writing fantasy romance,
Oh, excellent.
and I mean, there's a lot of definitions of, people can argue about genres just like
Yeah, yep.
anything else, but I've pretty much always been writing fantasy,
Mm.
and it's just been one subgenre or another with
Yeah, yeah.
fantasy. Right now, I'm writing fantasy romance just because the series before that was more like romantic fantasy, more like
Mm.
epic fantasy with a romance subplot.
Oh, that's cool.
But I really started getting a whole lot more fan mail when
Mm.
I had more romance in the later part of the series.
Mm.
And I enjoy it a lot too. Like most of the stuff I read is fantasy romance, like Sarah J. Maas and all of that. I
Oh,
know
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like cliche at this point to mention her, but I really like her.
yeah.
So,
A lot of people do,
so
yeah.
right, right. So it made sense to me to pivot just a little bit and try straight up fantasy romance. So I'll probably just keep playing in that kind of zone, maybe a little a little bit of a different point of view or something
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. But yeah, that's what I like. I enjoy magic, and
Oh
I
yeah.
enjoy love, and I enjoy healthy relationships in books, and the banter that you get from enemies to lovers. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
that's kind of my jam. So
Yeah, yeah. No,
I
totally.
like all the tropes, and I like how you can take them and twist them and do your own unique thing with it. And yeah, I enjoy it a lot. And
That's
of course,
excellent.
world building is like my favorite because I
Oh
like
yeah.
to research. So I like to base it all on something. So
Oh, that's
I enjoy
cool.
that side of it too.
Well, that's awesome. I ruined a couple of friends of mine because I had some certain authors on from the same genre, and they're like, "Well, what are you doing? It's a fantasy and sci-fi podcast." I said, "Yeah, and if you have any sort of romance with fantasy or sci-fi or horror or whatever," I said, "that's fantasy and sci-fi." And one of these people, well, say it's very random, on Facebook, when I put something up about it, was like, "Oh, trying to say that romance doesn't belong with fantasy or whatever
Right.
or
Yeah,
sci-fi."
we get that a lot.
And I was like, I blew him, I blew it up for him, and I he didn't respond for days, and then he probably messaged me, said, "Yeah, I guess I was wrong."
Daniel, tell them.
Well, I was like, so my favorite movie and your favorite movie, because I had seen him say something, was Empire Strikes Back. And then he goes, "Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah." I said, "Okay." I said, "So are you trying to tell me that the romance between Han and Leia in that sci-fi movie did not help drive the plot?" And he goes just like, "Oh no." And then I said, and because I know he loves George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, I said, "Now let's talk about Willow." I said, when you have like
Yeah.
Sorsha, and Mad Mortigan, I said that had to be one of the most romantic things I've ever seen, where she literally throws everything she's known, and granted her mom's a bad person, but still is her mother, right? And literally just like goes over to the other side. And I was like, in the
Right.
moment where they like, connect and literally just like are killing all the people in between them to get to one another, I was like, that was pretty romantic. And he was just like, "You son of a gun."
You've done it.
Yeah. And I
Well, I mean, I think
mentioned
the
Lord of the
thing too,
Rings, like with,
right?
Aragorn and, Liv Tyler, like
Romance is relatable too. Like,
exactly. Yep.
not all of us get to swing a sword. I mean, I do because I have some,
That's
but
fair.
like, not everybody gets to do this, and we can't do magic and like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but love, all of us get to experience, and
Yep.
it's a joyous thing usually, or it's dramatic at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think it's great. Love makes the world go round. So I
Yeah.
love including romance in my books. It intrigues me. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
romance writers get a lot of flack for sure,
Well, that's
but
like,
that's all right. We don't care.
well, it's like I was just talking in a Star Wars like TikTok group or whatever somewhere on Facebook, and it was the courtship of Princess Leia, and I forget who the author was. I'm feeling so bad right now, but it had to be one of the best Star Wars books I've ever read. And it was literally like, so Princess Leia has to choose in like the Republic, and she's being pressured to make a it's Dethimer, like where the Rancors are from, and they're like pressuring her to marry this like one prince or whatever, Izor, and she like doesn't want to because she's in love with Han. And
Right.
I was 13, and I remember being at my best friend at the time's birthday party, and I had to keep reading. I was
Oh,
so engrossed, and I must have finished that in like maybe 8 hours, and
I love it.
and
That's
and a lot of
great.
people were like, "Oh, this is the worst Star Wars book," and I'm like, "No, it's one of the best because instead of just having violence or the Force or whatever, I'm like, here we have somebody that has to make a decision." And I mean, it really got to me, and
Right,
it
right.
was
Well,
one of
I
the
think
best
too that
ones.
romance is like inherently character driven.
I
And that
agree,
pulls me
totally.
to it as well, because
Yep.
you can't have, like, I actually love plot. Like, I love plot. I love action. I'm not like, my books are very commercial. Like, that's what I like.
Hmm.
But if you start with romance and you're plotting from a romance perspective, it's always character driven because
Yeah.
that's why it's considered fantasy romance and
Yeah.
not just a romantic subplot. But even when you have a subplot, it can help that character, derived motivation and
Yeah.
not make it too like from the outside external kind of
No, totally.
propelling us forward. So I like
Yeah.
that element of it too.
Yeah. Well, I said to him, I was like, said to a couple people, I was like, there's always guys, right? And I'm like, I'm just like, I was like, I just I was like, I guess I can see why your girlfriends and wives don't want to spend time with you. Like, I didn't say that,
Hey,
but
you said that, not me.
that's what I was thinking. Cause I'm just like, one guy like said, I was like, maybe you need to like try to sweep your way, girlfriend off your feet over. I was like, bring us some flowers or something. I was like, I don't know, like
That's
write her a
right.
nice note or something. I'm just like, I just was like, shook my head. I'm like, oh man. Yeah, but I just think it's interesting because any great story, movie or whatever, that, Iron Man's a great example. Sorry if nobody's seen, Endgame, but that was just like Pepper's look to him, to Tony, and he just does the nod and does the
Right. It
thing and
makes you
everything.
care about them
Oh
because
my
someone
God.
cares for them,
I
right? Like,
cried. My buddy and I were both like crying. We were both just like, I'm like, you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. You good? And and we're pretty manly men as I consider. And it
man
just
enough to cry. I like
yeah,
it.
it
That's how
just
it should
crushed
be.
me. It crushed me. And I just watched that scene recently, and I just don't think, and this is my point to a couple people I talked to recently, a couple guys, I was like, I don't think that would have had as much impact if it hadn't have been the look between him and his wife. And like, I'm
Mhm.
married, and I was just thinking if I were in that circumstance, and that's why
Right.
I was blubbering like a baby, and so I
And
just
that's that relatable element again, right?
exactly, yep,
You
exactly,
can put yourself in their shoes more because you've had a relationship or you've wanted one,
yep,
yeah.
yep, yeah, totally, yeah. It's always interesting when people say that. I'm just like, I don't know. I think anything great that I've ever read with fantasy or sci-fi has had a great romance in it, and I
Right.
consider that romance. So sorry if anybody doesn't like that, but that's the truth.
To
So
each their own, it's
yeah,
fine.
exactly, exactly. For that third one there, so what is your Kingdoms of Lore series about, and how did you come up with this idea?
It is a fantasy romance of standalones with that follow a different couple with each book, but they're interconnected. So by the time you get to the end, you've seen everybody heavy cameo action.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
and they tie together for an overarching villain. I got that idea, gosh, it's kind of an amalgam of things. I
Hmm.
usually end up having some weird dream and it makes me
Oh, that's
think of
fair.
something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And music also really inspires me.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
I also was thoroughly obsessed with The Last Kingdom. That I'm like, because I'm a history nerd. So
Speaking
like the
of
lead,
romance, speaking
right?
of romance.
The lead in Enchanting the Elven Mage, I
Hmm.
mean, he is he's so Uhtred, guys. He is. I did like he's
Oh,
not. He's different. He has a completely different backstory and setup, but completely different story. But he's very Uhtred-y because I liked how he was like this strong leader and a little bit reckless, at least at the beginning of the
yeah, yeah.
series. But he also had such a like heart for justice and
Yep,
for helping people and to
yep.
be really honest. Like he wasn't afraid to be vulnerable, but then also chop somebody's head off. I like those things. Like
Yeah.
I I just really appreciated the depth of character. And so when I was writing this book, it was kind of an amalgam of all those things. Something I dreamt, something I heard, listening to music, and the lyrics inspire me. What I'm watching on TV.
Hmm,
Sometimes it's a specific thing, but mostly my books are like that. It's
hmm.
just kind of a lot of things feeding into that. Um, and it's also inspired by Sleeping Beauty.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
I don't really, I don't usually like retellings. Like everyone can like what they want to like, but I don't want to read a retelling usually because I know exactly how it's going to play out.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
good retellings, of course, don't usually do that.
yeah, yeah.
But I just wanted to kind of be loosely inspired by some of the story elements and
Hmm.
see if I could twist them in a different way.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it just was like kind of a fun writing challenge. Um, so if anybody reads that, you'll definitely see it in there. I mean, the lead character's name is Aurora, I mean,
Oh, that's cool.
and he's Philip. But aside from the names, you'll see like some Weaver magic in there,
Oh,
which
that's
I
cool.
I use some old folklore combined with what I would think that witch would do, and just just a lot of those Sleeping Beauty elements are in there. So each one of
Hmm,
the books in that series is loosely inspired by a fairy tale. So the second one is Robin
that's
Hood,
cool.
and the third one is Beauty and the Beast. That's always a really popular one. Yeah, there's like a million Beauty and the Beast inspired
Yeah, yeah,
stories,
yeah.
but I think that touches on a lot of universal fantasies for women. So I think that's a psychological thing too. So why not write it? It's good.
Yeah, yeah.
People want it. So
Oh, that's very
um,
cool.
but yeah, that's that series. And I just released another book in that series called Enchanting the Dryad Prince, because I'm obsessed with trees for sure.
Oh, I feel that.
Um, I loved like the Ents and Lord of the Rings, you know.
Oh my,
So
my wife always laughs because when we have a long walk somewhere, I'm like, it's the last walk of the Coolbaughs. She's like, she hasn't even seen Lord of the Rings, but she knows like what that scene is
she
because I
knows
just
that
love them.
line.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
that's
I
cool.
that one I wrote and I released actually into an anthology called Kingdoms of Night. So it's in an anthology with some friends right now.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, so that's a little bit about that. I hope I
I was just
answered your question.
so it was just so hard for which I like having an author where it's hard. It was just really hard for me to pick. Usually I'm like trying to pick something, but I was like going through, like your Amazon, or sorry, yeah, your Amazon profile and then Goodreads,
Mhm.
and I was like, what's a really good one to ask a question on? And that seemed to be a really good one because it just seemed really interesting from a writer standpoint, a reader standpoint, and an advertising standpoint. It just
Right.
seemed like you had a lot there, with some really, really cool ideas. And I don't know, I personally like all those things that you said. I love Sleeping Beauty. I think that's a really cool legend. And Weavers, when you said Weavers, I like almost died. I was like, oh, that's really cool because
Yeah,
just saw
I
an
love
article on
any
that.
kind of like witchy folklore. I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
that kind of thing. So I
that's
always have a
cool.
little bit of that in my books, and usually dragons or wyverns or both.
Yeah, yeah, oh,
So
that's cool.
um yeah, anyway, it's your typical kind of high fantasy, and turns into more epic fantasy as it moves forward.
Mm,
But it is a fantasy romance, so it has a lot of those. Like some fantasy romance doesn't have as much battle action, but I really
mm.
like a good battle, at least one.
Oh yeah,
So I enjoy that kind of. That's always my favorite part in books. So,
yeah, yeah. That's
so I
fair.
always have a lot of that too.
Oh, that's really
And
cool.
it's fun to see the different types of magic. Like if I work
Mm.
off an elemental magic system in
Oh,
that
that's cool.
series, and it's fun to play with how that's working with the environment and the setting. Like where are they? What are their
Mm.
resources here? What can they use? So
Oh,
it's
that
kind of
would be
also like
really
a
cool.
fun puzzle to
Yeah.
figure out. Like this
Oh yeah.
person's going to work really well here, but they're not going to have anything to do over here.
Mm.
So what are they going to do? So
Oh, that's
it's
cool.
kind of fun.
Yeah, that would be really fun from a writer standpoint. Hmm. Got me thinking. You also blew my mind when you said, when you were talking about Uhtred, because like my novella right now, and I got this urban fantasy like monster character or monster hunter, and he's an ex-recon Marine. I've done horrible things to him in the first trilogy. I feel of novellas. I feel so bad, but it's gonna make
Poor
such a good
fella.
story. Yeah, I feel bad for him. But much like Robin Hobbs, um, oh, I'm totally blanking on Fitz.
Assassin's Apprentice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Fitz,
Fitz.
like
I
much
love
like
those
Fitz,
books.
I promise that whatever bad I do to this young man Nathaniel, it will get so much better by the end. But
Right.
yeah, I just, you just blew my mind. I didn't realize why he's got a ponytail and he's kind of Nordic and has that thing, and why he's got a sword on his back, and why he I was
See, the
thinking
things we like sneak into our books
yeah,
big time.
well, I was so thinking that I was writing him to be more like me in a urban fantasy setting because I really like certain things, and I have a tendency to do the right thing, even though it sometimes screws me over,
Hmm.
particularly in my career, because I'll just tell people the truth. I'm a teacher, so I try and do things for the students, and I don't kiss anybody's butt. So sometimes,
Right.
that hurts, and myself, but it's good for the kids. But I thought that I was writing the character to be more like me, but now I'm thinking that I was writing him to be more like me because I connect with Uhtred so well with a lot of
Hmm.
those things. Like if you mess with a kid, one of my children at my school,
Right.
like you better just go walk the other way, and I get that. And I really
Hmm.
like you said, like he is really strong, right? And he's reckless at times, but at the same time, he's got such a sweet
Hmm.
vulnerable side, that he only shows like towards his men, like I just love the interaction
Oh, I
between
love
him
the
and
relationship. Yes, I
yes,
love a
oh,
dude relationship because,
they're so
and that's,
bro.
I've got this little knot of two of them are brothers, but the other ones are just friends, like in that series. And I get fan mail about just them hanging out. Like, can
Oh,
we
that's
just
so
hang out with the
cool.
guys? Because I mean, teaching martial arts and being in this business for a long time with my husband, hung out with a lot of dudes,
Yeah,
so, and I've seen these really great relationships he's had, and I like seeing that in books. I also obviously like doing that with my female characters as well.
oh yeah.
Um, but I think friendship is also a super, super important part of my
Mm,
books. I always want to include that sort of thing because I feel like people need to know that you can have a relationship like this. Like, don't let that person treat you like that. This is
yeah.
what you should be aiming for.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Well, I was always tease my buddy because my one friend hasn't seen The Last Kingdom yet, so I'm always teasing him, and but my other friend has. So like we're always like joking. I'm like, um, oh my gosh, he'll just like say somebody's name. He'll be like, you're like my Uhtred, and I'd be like, you're like my so and so, and like it's just so
Mhm.
funny that our other friends like, I haven't seen that show yet. I'm like, you have Netflix, like. I was like, you're
Do it.
acting like, yeah, I was like, you're acting like we're like twisting your arm. I'm like, we're trying to help you have one of the best experiences of your cinematic life here, especially now
It
that
was
the
just
show
so
is
well
gonna,
done.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like, yeah,
I'll
everybody
just
was
turn this whole
just,
podcast into a fan show about
oh
Last
my
Kingdom. I don't
gosh.
care. I'm here for it.
I, I have quite a few people where I've talked where they're like, we need to just have a Last Kingdom talk now that I've like finished the
Yes.
show and everything. And I was like, oh my God, that would be really fun. So I have to put you down for that too, because it'd be really fun. Because we were
Oh my
talking
God.
dissecting, the seasons, episodes, characters, and things
I
we
mean,
like,
they have
didn't
a
like.
fighting nun. That makes me so
Right?
happy.
She's so I just and I love how
And their
Uhtred's always like,
relationship is amazing.
yeah,
Like,
it's like the older sister that he never had, or
I
or
just
younger,
love
whatever.
it.
Yeah, and I always love where he's like, "You're too good for God." Like, I'm like, and
Right.
I'm like, from a guy that like kind of believes in God but doesn't really. I'm like, that's a pretty big compliment, and I just like how he respects her, and
Yeah.
he's you expect him to be like this chauvinistic pig, and
Hmm.
I don't know. I just
But
I
he's
was
not at
very,
all, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I love reading the books. I'm actually on the Pale Horseman in the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited now that the show's done because I had started with the show, so I wanted that to be done so that then and have a little bit of time so that then I'd forget some things so I could really enjoy the
Right.
books. But yeah, we could
Well,
we could turn this all day.
I read just The Last Kingdom
Mm.
years and years ago.
Oh
Like,
man.
I don't know when that came out, but my paperback is ancient. So
Oh yeah. I mean, it was like I think it came out like I might have been in like middle school. I'm pretty sure one of the authors I talked to, him and I are the same age. He might be a year older than me, but I think I was like seventh grade. So I think it was like maybe 2000, 2001. I remember it was right around like 9/11 when I had a friend reading it, which I had thought it was a
wow.
little bit older, but I think it was right around that time. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, that's a one I'm really anxious to really finish the series and get caught
Yeah,
up
I
with.
can definitely see myself going back and reading that again. I used
Yeah,
to
that was a
read
good
all
one.
before I got into, like, I read fantasy as a kid, and then I read historical fiction,
Mm. Oh, I love,
and
yeah.
now I'm reading fantasy again with some historical fiction.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's definitely one of my genres that I love for
Oh
sure.
yeah. I started with historical fiction, so I love when somebody does like a really good, like I'm writing like a historical urban fantasy with the Lost Roman Legion and they encounter
Oh, cool.
zombies. Yeah, then I get like
Did
the
you watch that
leftovers.
movie? It wasn't great, but I still liked it. The
I
Eagle.
did. I did. I saw the Eagle and I saw the other one too that was like even less than that. Was like a B movie kind of thing, but it was
I
like the
mean, there are parts
Centurion
of
or
The Eagle I
something.
loved. Oh, I
Oh
never saw
yeah.
that one, I don't think. But
It
there
was
were parts of The
cheesy,
Eagle I
but
loved just because you never get to see it.
yeah, yep. No,
You
it's
know what
totally
I
true.
mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh, but it's this is not a great movie, but look, like I want to like it so bad.
Yeah. I was like, I went and I was like, all right. And then I remember my buddy and I went and saw something else that was historical fiction at that time. And I can't remember what it was. I think it was almost like the same time that Troy and like something else came out. And so we went to that instead or after. I think we literally went right into the other movie and
That's
our
awesome.
minds were blown. And I was like, okay. And I was just like, all right. But yeah, so maybe one of these days, maybe people will like my historical urban fantasy and they'll make a movie about that. But
That'd be awesome.
yeah, it'd be cool. Speaking of world building, so you mentioned world building. So what is your philosophy when it comes to world building? And I guess what I mean by that is like so with history, like I always like think of, I guess it's because I really like Oblivion, Skyrim, and Morrowind, I always think of like what different factions or magic system, how do those factions use the magic system,
Mhm.
like kind of things like that. I guess I start thinking, I guess I just always start with those two things. But or maybe like a class of people that I like in particular that the character can
Mhm.
be from, and then kind of go from there. But when it comes to your world building, like what's the first place that you start? I feel like that's what.
I I usually start and if you're a student, don't do this, but I start on Wikipedia. But I'm
Good for
really just
writers.
looking at right. I'm kind of like to look for niche cultures, like small
Mm,
places that
yeah,
have
yeah.
been sort of isolated, so they still retain
Mm,
some of those old traditions.
it's a great idea.
Like in Dragons Rising, I was studying, and if I ever say anything disrespectful about any culture, just fault my dumbness. You like dumbness. There it is. Perfect. Um, because I just adore studying other cultures. Like
Mm,
I love it. I should have gone into anthropology, like
mm.
honestly, because I took one anthropology course in college when I was getting ready to go into grad school, and I was like, "Oh, this is what I wanted to study." Like, and it would have been great for writing.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, yeah. No, totally.
too late. But so I usually pick out some kind of niche culture. Like for my Dragons Rising series, I was looking at Basque country
Oh yeah.
and all of like the political stuff there and their folklore there, their flags, their what do they drink? What is the regular food? Why do they have that food? And what weird jobs does that create that I have never seen before in
Mm,
Nashville, Tennessee? Because there's just different ways of life that I don't
yeah,
even
yeah,
know that exist. Even though I've traveled the world, there's so much to see and there's so many things
yeah,
we don't know about. So I love learning something new. So I usually start with that, like some kind of culture I'm not super familiar
yeah,
with,
yeah.
or I visited briefly, or I've just heard about somewhere.
Mm,
And I start there. And then I just start thinking about who lives there and what their lives are like. And then I start layering in the fantasy kind of elements to it. Like, okay, they do this, but there's this other culture I heard about that did this.
mm.
And if I did this with that, that could actually be a form of magic. So I
Oh, that'd
start
be
kind
cool.
of like patchworking different things together.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and a lot of it's just me making it up because, that's how it's unique. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, either that or I start with a point in history,
Mm.
because, like I said, I love history. Like my Plains of Sand and Steel, which is book 3 in my Uncommon World series, is based on the story of Shajal al-Dur
Oh,
and
okay.
during the Mamluk Sultanate.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one right there. That's a good
Yeah,
time
I mean,
period.
there's
That's a
these
good idea.
baddies coming at him, right? And
Yeah,
her husband dies, and she hides his body and wins the battle.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, yes, I love that. So I did my own version of it. It's definitely not the story of Shajal Dur anymore, but there is a woman. Her husband dies. That happens at the beginning, and she has
That's
to
a
run this
good
battle.
idea.
Um, so it's not in the same area of the world. It's that area was a little more made up, but I got different inspiration from different places.
Mm.
Some of that was Mongolia, some of that was Syria. Like it's just all over. Like how do they do their crops? Like when you're a walled city in an arid environment,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
they have these pots. And that's how they keep them underground. And that's how they watered their plants back then, because I usually write medieval. So there's not a
Mm.
lot of tech going on.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So then I thought, oh, we can use those actually as explosives. That would work as an explosive. So they have those on
Oh,
hand.
that's a
So
good
it just
idea.
kind of grows after that.
Yeah.
But it's my favorite part. I really could just keep doing that and never write a book and be really happy and be fine.
Some of us have done that for years.
Well, right. That's called a bad month. I'm not supposed to do that.
My friend was like, at one point, it's like, so how many pages of your like encyclopedia of your fantasy world do you have? And I was like, oh, like 30. And he's like, well, how many words is that? I was like, oh, it's like 100,000.
It's mind your own business number. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I was like, I'm trying to be the iceberg, and I would always quote that. And I think
Yeah.
really it was just like I just didn't have the right tools to finish writing anything yet. And I feel like a lot of
Right.
like a kid asked me the other day in class. He's like, which I think it's nice to to ask other authors this question, because that we're all different. And
Yeah, for sure.
he asked me, he's like, well, where do I start? And I'm like, well, it depends on you. And I felt like that was a very Yoda answer, and I was just like,
Right.
like
On you, it depends.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, but you know, we kind of narrowed it down. I said, well, what do you like? I said, I always love art. I was originally gonna be an illustrator, and I said I go and I'll see some like something, you know, a picture, a painting, a warrior, you
Yeah.
know, like there's this one painting from a game, and it's this like jade female warrior in this jade armor. And it's like
Cool.
I mean, it's so cool. And I came up with the coolest character for her. And she got this like jade sword. And I'm just like, the whole world started to come to me. And I was like, stop,
Right.
stop, stop. Because I was like, I'm writing all these other things, but I can't wait to go back to her. And she was like speaking to me. And but there were these like kind of like Forgotten Realms. I forget what they call and other things, but like the sanguine, they're like the oh, kind of like the fishmen or whatever. They kind of have like
Right.
a lizard face, you know,
Uh-huh.
and they're in there, and there's two of them facing her, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I was like, this would be like the coolest story that, you know, her like aquatic, I don't know, like Asian kingdom is being, you know,
Right.
invaded by them. And so I said to him, I was like, I always start with art personally, and it gives me an
Oh, art's an
idea.
awesome place to start.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
know,
that's
and I said
great.
I'll write a character, something about a character, whatever comes to mind, you know. So her, I wrote a battle where, you know, it was like a smaller skirmish or something where she has to fight these creatures off a boat, you know, and then all of a sudden it just came from there. And I've had to stop myself to try and finish my other things. But so I kind of was like, well, it's kind of like that. I said some of my friends like you who, you know, do a time in history, or, you know, start with a group, or I told him, I was like, I just think you need to figure out what it is what that's interesting, you know, to you, and then kind of go from there. But isn't it
Yeah, you just
interesting
try to
how,
kind of follow your curiosity, and then you
yeah,
end up with a book that's so you that no one
yep,
else could do, you know?
that's a great way to put it. I just always find it so interesting talking to so many authors like yourself, where it's like we all do the same thing, but it's in such different ways, you know.
Right.
And my oh my gosh, because I had like 7 authors this week. I think it was Angela Henry had mentioned in our interview this week where she was like, isn't it crazy how, you know, like, oh, so yeah, it was her and I, because I talked about doing a panel. I want someone to give me a world building idea, a character idea, and a faction and a conflict. And I want it to be the same idea. And let's say that you and I are the authors that come, and we write our own separate stories, like let's say it's like short stories or whatever, or novella, and then come together, and it's the same idea, but we see how both of us writes it differently.
Right. Right.
And I just want to do that exercise at some point with
It would be really
somebody.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it'd be so interesting to, because we were debating that question this week, like, why is it that, you know, like we've all done the same thing, but it's completely different. Like how can you have, you know, you only have 26, you know, letters in the alphabet for English. It's like, how on earth could we come up with these, you
I
know,
know, it's
10,000
crazy.
10,000 books a day are sold on Amazon Kindle, you know, whatever, or you know,
Humans can be
have been
terrible, but
published.
we can also be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think it really shows. I actually mentioned that this week. I said, you know, my kids we were studying ancient history and the crappy things, and I said, you know, I mentioned that, and I said I think it really shows, you know, human potential, you know, it really is
Hmm.
really boundless when you think about it. But yeah,
Right. Right.
it's funny that you said that, because I feel like with certain stories I like to do that. Like, you know, I like the veteran, or just a very interesting group of people to me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You know, and I took a lot of their culture. I basically just did them and just put a different name on them, because I just thought they were so cool. And I have this
I
one
studied their
character.
like wool
Oh,
tents and how the water
yes,
makes them swell. So
yes,
they
oh my gosh, yep. I had to stop researching them, because then I stopped writing for a while. So I was like, well, I'm gonna finish writing the book, and then I'll go back and add more things for them. But they are just like absolutely fascinating to me. Like,
right.
yeah. So I definitely get you there. I had learned one thing about them, and I was like, oh, they're definitely going to be like the whole group of people in this book. So
Yeah,
yeah,
because it's just such a specific way of life. Like,
yeah. And I feel like
and
not a
they,
lot of people have know about them, you know, and
right,
those
right,
things. So it's not like your typical, you know, like you know, European fantasy or whatever, you
right,
know.
right.
And there was this one group too, like Wizard of Earthsea, where it was like the book 3, where Jed and his like apprentice, or the boys with him, and they meet this like roaming band of seafaring people that literally have these raft, like this big raft city, and they follow these giant whales. And
Yeah, because it's like water world, but
yes. And I was like, were there any people that actually did that? And I forget their names, but there is an actual people that um the writer, like she got that from Ursula K. Le Guin. And I started researching them, and I was like, their way of life sounds more fantasy than what she came up with. Like
right.
it was so cool. It was like in
Yeah, you find
Indonesia or
the
something.
craziest things, like things you couldn't even make up. You're like,
Yep.
whoa, this really
Yeah.
exists. Like,
Yeah. Well, it's like
wow,
truth is stranger than fiction, right? It's just
it
like,
is.
yeah, it's
That's
really
why
crazy.
fantasy, using history and
Mm.
it's just such a good jumping off point.
Yeah, yeah.
It gives you so much to work from.
Oh,
It's so
totally.
cool.
Yeah, totally. Well, that was a really good answer. So what is one writing tool or strategy that you could not live without?
Mhm. My process is pretty simple. So, I use like a beat sheet or,
Mm.
like,
No, yeah, yeah.
and I do a really skeletal plot and then I just write. And I usually write linearly unless I'm struggling. And then I skip to like a makeout scene or a battle scene, you know. But I do use Pinterest for myself a
Oh,
lot.
that's a
I
good
don't
one.
actually promote it much. Like I think I have like 5 followers literally. Like I've never used it. I always forget to even share my boards, but for me, they're like important because I just put pictures on there that inspire a certain tone
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or a setting or a certain scene. I just, at that point, once I've got kind of a story in my head and I start looking those things up, it just helps me flesh it out a little bit more
Yeah,
visually.
yeah.
So I would not want to have to write without Pinterest. I really do appreciate
That's a good
that
one.
platform.
That's a really good one. I've heard a lot of authors recently where I have been listening to different podcasts. You're probably the fourth author to say that, in within the last week that I've heard. And Pinterest was one that I used to use a lot, and I would get so lost. I had to set a timer. I'm like, okay, I'm only gonna
Yeah,
find
for sure.
5 characters in
Hmm.
15 minutes, and then 2 hours goes by. So
Yeah,
I
you have to have a
deleted
lot
it
of
from my phone.
self-control.
Yeah, I deleted it from my phone because I have no self-control. The artist in me is just like, oh, that's so cool. But yeah, that's a really good one. I had not considered that, and I did not think that was one that somebody would say on here. But that's a
I
really,
I
really good
also
one.
use I use Brain FM
Oh,
too,
I
and
heard
I
that
know a
was
lot
really
of
good.
people do that.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
definitely helps me because they have the like weird trippy beats or something that
yeah,
does
yeah, yeah,
something to your brain, and you can pick like deep focus for like editing, or you
yeah,
can do
yeah.
like creative flow, and it's all instrumental and it keeps you from being interrupted.
Mm,
Um, so I really like that too.
that's a
So
good one. I'm
I
actually gonna
cheated.
have
I
to do
gave you
that.
two.
Well, that's fine because I keep forgetting to try that one out, and I've had like 3 people recently, suggest that to me, and I keep forgetting. So I'm actually gonna have to go do that for my second writing session tonight because that's a really good one. Because now I used to be able to write with words like 90s songs, and now I found that I get distracted too easily, which is weird. How I was totally fine for like 5 years, and all of a sudden now it's like it doesn't work anymore. So I've been doing a lot of instrumentals, and I feel like it's kind of hard to find specific ones that I like. So I think that's a really good
Right.
idea. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
I normally like to make a playlist for whatever
Mm,
scene I'm writing or whatever book, and but sometimes you just need something to help you focus real quick,
yeah, no,
and you get a
totally.
little tired of those songs sometimes. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like it. Yeah,
no, that's a good idea. All right, so my favorite question, because the graphic designer in me, I blame my mother because my mother's an interior designer and taught me how to
my
do
mom's
graphic
an
design.
artist too.
Oh, that's crazy. That's super cool. So who does your book covers, and how do you go about deciding there are common themes within like the trilogy or series? Because yours were done really well. I feel like a lot of people I see, they're kind of book one's here in this style and book two's here. And I personally love when they're matching and there's a common theme. And I feel like I
Right.
saw,
Yeah, it actually bothers me that not all mine are exactly like that bothers me. Like I'm not a perfectionist person at all. Like if you can see I'm an eclectic, things go everywhere kind of, but that bothers me that they don't all match. But
Mm.
anyway, I digress. I usually pick out a cover designer for a series. So I think I've used a different cover designer for every single series.
Oh, okay.
Um, I just try to keep it similar in that usually it's a person or a couple, and keep it at least that.
Mm.
but usually I'm talking to other authors that are maybe a little bit farther down the road than me. And I talk to them about what they feel like the market wants to see in a book cover, what will help sales. Because my personal taste, like I really like object covers and typography covers. But what sells are people covers in my genre. Now, not necessarily on TikTok. That's a whole new ball game that has caused a wonderful disruption. I love it. I think that passion for books over there is fantastic. So not downing that at all. But yeah, they seem to like the symbol and typography covers. But my biggest income is from ebooks. So I need to pay attention to not just one audience that likes one thing, when all these other ones, I have data to prove they like these other ones, you know? So, but yeah, I usually go on referrals. I talk to people and say, I like this cover, who did it for you? Or do you have anybody in mind that I can look at their portfolio? That kind of thing. And I mean, it's great. I'm always so in awe of anyone who can do that stuff, because I'm totally that person that's like, oh, I can learn how to do this. And I like pull up Procreate on my daughter's iPad, and she's like, Mom, you don't know what you're doing. And I'm like, you're correct. Never mind. Like, you know, so I have so much respect for cover designers, for character art. A lot of the stuff too, I get off Instagram. So I have teenagers, so they teach me how to do things. So my daughter taught me how to search on Instagram, like for people that are, you know, beginning artists and stuff like that. So sometimes I can get somebody new and kind of give them, you know, a start and do some character art just free for my newsletter or something like that. Or I'll find people that are more experienced, because I'm not going to take really a gamble on a book cover. That's too, you know, for my business. So I usually just use referrals for book covers. So, but
well, they all look really good.
Story Wrappers did the Kingdoms of Lore series.
Oh, okay.
And then the Kingdoms of Lore Underworld was by Alarim, who is on Fiverr. No, 99 Designs. I should know that.
Oh, I gotta say, so a couple of the 99 Designs that I just saw come out like within the last week with some newer covers. Like I had already looked at a couple people on there, but 3 of them just came out recently, and I saved them. I was like, these are absolutely brilliant. There was one in particular, I was just like, I can't believe that anybody came up with this idea. I was just like astounded. So that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun too. That's another rabbit hole too, for sure, for me. Is to start looking at cover designers' portfolios, because I'm like, oh, this is cute. I've picked out book 4 in a series I haven't even plotted book 1 for. Good job. Get back to work, woman. So yeah, I love it. It's a really fun part of the job, and there's so many talented people out there. It's amazing to me. Like AC Graphics and Cover Dungeon did my print version of my Kingdoms of Lore Underworld series.
Oh, cool.
Because I wanted to do a different version for print versus ebook, just because those tend to be 2 different markets. So jury's still out on how that went. It's hard to know, because I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see how it turns out.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
But yeah.
Well, the graphic designer in me really liked I've just seen so many people where it's like the book 1 in a trilogy looks like I did this artist and I did this artist for book 2 and 3, and yours were all like really consistent. So I looked at one set and I was like, oh, those are really cool. You know, they're very stunning images. They match really well. And then I saw another one. I was like, oh, those look really good too. And I think I got to like 4 of your series, you know, or trilogies. And I was like, oh, this looks really. I was like, I didn't really know which one to ask about, because I was like, these all look really good. But you know, I've seen a lot of book. That's all I do is study book covers. You know, partly in blurbs and things. But yeah, they looked really, really good. So
yeah, the hard part is like when you get somebody. This is really true for character art too, because I think character art is really an important element of our marketing packages. But once somebody, like, everyone finds out they're good, they get all booked up. And you have to go find somebody else.
That's my artist.
Torn. Yeah, when someone's like, who did that picture for you? I'm like, can you like DM me? Like I'll tell you, but maybe don't tell 900 people. Which is the wrong attitude. I know.
Well, it's hard, right? It's,
you know, it's hard not to be greedy, right? Like they're so good.
Yeah, like I had a guy, you know, 160 for digital art, and it's absolutely amazing. And did 3 things for my website, and I was like, "Ugh, I need like 3 more things done." Well, now he's like completely booked, and and
Yeah,
I
exactly.
had referred people to him, and my friend was like, "You
I mean,
shouldn't
it's a
do
great
that." And
problem, right?
yeah, yeah,
But
I was just like, well, I was like, I was like, he wants to do well too, and I was like, he probably won't be able to do art anymore if I, me and other people don't refer him. So I was
right.
glad to see that he's doing really well. But what
Yeah.
very, very well deserved. His craft has gotten a lot better in the last two years to an absolute. The one I just saw recently, he's like, oh yeah, I just did this random thing for this person, and I was like, oh my God. I
Wow.
was like, oh my God, this is so
Gimme.
amazing. Yeah. And I was like, I don't even care if you want like triple. I was trying to give him like a tip or something. He's like,
Yeah,
no, just this.
if
And
they're
I'm
too
like,
low.
yeah. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, I think it's too low. And, so I kept trying to order things from him, to help him out and stuff. But yeah, it's amazing what people can do. But yeah, it is really hard when you find somebody good because you start cheering them and then everybody else finds them. And then all of a sudden you can't afford them
Right.
anymore. So
Well,
yeah.
that happens too sometimes, and I respect them raising their prices for sure, but
Oh, for sure. For
sometimes it
sure.
ends up that it's out of my budget because
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know how
yeah.
much this is going to bring in or
Yep.
whatever. That
Oh
that has
yeah.
happened as well for sure to me.
Well, I always tease Felix Ortiz and and Shanti King, and just like a great duo, like one of the best right now in any traditional or indie publishing business. And I'm always teasing Felix. I'm like, as soon as I win the lottery, I was like, I'm just gonna book you guys
I'm gonna book you
and
solid on
hire
retainer.
you. Yeah, I'm gonna hire you and I'm gonna do like an old Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance type of thing. And I was telling all my friends, I was like, who wants to come writing for me in my fantasy world? I was like, you, and you. And I was like, I'm just gonna pay everybody a buttload. And yeah, it's just like, oh, that's like the dream. But
That would be very fun. That sounds
yeah, yeah.
great.
I'd be like, my friend was like, oh, I could just see you being like you know, the head like Elon Musk of fantasy series, like a big fantasy series. And now I can't get out of my head. So but that's super cool though. That's awesome. So who are some authors that after you read them, you're just like, okay, I have to put this book down and now I have to write.
Oh, wow. So my one author that really inspires me is Maggie Stiefvater,
Ooh.
and she writes more literary YA fantasy. So that's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
even what I write, but it has elements of like folk magic in it, and the way
yeah.
that she weaves history into her. And I just like the words, like she's just so lyrical. Like I I'll read something. I'll just like I just listened to her Bravely that she did for Disney.
Oh, yep, yep, yep.
So it was kind of a younger thing. That's not really my books are older for
Yeah, yeah,
sure, but it was like younger YA, but just her language, just I just want to roll around in her words. Like I
yeah,
love
yeah, yeah.
them. Like just the way she phrases things and evokes emotion and even just the rhythm of the sentences. Like it's like poetry. Like I just love it. But her Scorpio Races is like my
Mm.
all-time favorite book just for me to read. I reread that book. I also really like Laurie Forrest.
Oh
She
yeah.
wrote the Black Witch
Yep, yep.
series. Yeah. I'm actually getting ready to read Demon Tide, so I'm not quite caught up,
Ooh.
but that did come out this year, so I'm not too far behind. I just really like how she does. Like, I always have a lot of different fantasy creatures in my book, like dragon shifter and the dragon and a
Oh, that'd be
wyvern,
cool.
and I have just a lot of different types, like a water mage and a fae, and I enjoy that. And her series is a lot like that. So I like seeing how she does that. And her ability to put you in the setting is just god tier. She's so good at it. Like just those little tiny elements where you're not reading 5 pages of description, but she does just those couple of sentences. And for some
Yeah.
reason, they're so like the imagery is just like spot on.
Mm.
So she really inspires me too.
You're like the third person to mention her for like this season so far, so that's really
Oh,
funny.
really? Wow. I'm
I
just like every
actually
other
got
girl. Oh.
book one. I think I got book one like the other day. It was like on sale for Kindle, and I was like, really? Like I think it was like 99 cents or something. It might have been a couple weeks
Nice.
ago. It was some sort of package or something. I don't know. It was something, and I'm like, I'm not gonna fault it. So I was like, yep, add that to the the Kindle into the TBR. And yeah, I really like that type of type of imagery. And from what I've heard, I'm just like, okay, that's gonna be my type of thing. So yeah,
Yeah,
those are two. That's a really good one.
as for indie publishing in my genre, well, she's not straight up indie, she's hybrid, but Danielle Jensen.
Oh, okay.
And she, full disclosure, she's kind of a friend of mine and
Oh,
I
cool.
adore her. But before I knew her, I was a fan of the Bridge Kingdom. I just
Mm,
love her world building. Like, there isn't even that much fantasy in her book. Like, I usually prefer more magic than that, but her world building is just beautiful. Like, it's so good, and her tension, like, oh, she's so good. But
oh, that's really good to
anyway,
know.
I'll stop gushing.
Oh no, it's really good to know. I'm always like my wife. She's like, is this a when I go buy a book? She's like, is this a reading book or is this a book that you're reading to get better at writing?
Oh,
And
right, yeah.
I'm like, a little bit of both. So
Hmm. And
yeah,
sometimes
that's
you have to read it twice because of that. You're like, okay, I just got caught up and I forgot to look at her
yep,
technique and I just enjoyed it so much.
yep.
And then
Which
you
is
have to
where
go back again and
Audible,
study it, right?
yeah, which is where I think Audible comes in perfectly for me because I like John Flanagan's one of them, the Ranger's Apprentice series, and
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I wasn't really writing at that time. I had a lot going on in my life and it wasn't great. So I had stopped writing, which I think was one reason why it wasn't great. And I was so focused on getting a job at the time. This was like years ago. And but I had read his series and it really got me back into wanting to write because I loved the main character and his interaction with his older like mentor character and the camaraderie. But like you said, like it's a very usually I like more, fantasy or creatures or magic. There's no technically magic in the world or whatever. And
Hmm.
it's very low magic, but the world building was just done so well. The characters had such a great interaction with one another. I felt like the characters themselves were the world building. And so I've been going back recently and re-listening to them on Audible. And I just got done with book one the other day as we came back from a trip. And it just gave me so many ideas. And yeah,
Yeah,
so sometimes I always try to tell people, if you don't have time to reread a book, like listen to it on Audible again, because especially as a writer, you might be able to.
it is a different
Yeah,
experience for sure when you're
yeah,
hearing it too. I think you just process it differently, like
I
the things that
agree.
go through your head.
Yeah, and because I feel like you're not, obviously you're not like reading it, so I think you are able to, just use the images in your head, and you don't have to.
Hmm.
I feel like my friend made a good point. He's like, you're not as distracted, with
Right.
spelling mistakes or this and that. He's like, maybe you don't get pulled out as much of the text. And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. You don't have to worry about flipping pages and, the
Right.
parts of paragraphs and things like that. So yeah, but yeah,
I
it's
always,
a
do you
good
listen
idea.
faster speed when you're doing that, when you're listening to audiobooks?
No, but I probably should because sometimes I'm just like, so I'm not going to say which one, but I listened to a science fiction book that I had read, and I read the book one. I want to get back into more science fiction because I was writing a lot of it, and then I took a break. I got kind of stuck here and there with some things. I think I need some help, but like in terms of structure and things. But I
Hmm.
was listening to one, and I just like I really enjoyed the story, and I loved reading the book, but like I keep forgetting you can do that. So that's why I actually switched to the other series with John Flanagan because I was just like the narrator does a much better job where it's just like
Hmm.
bam, 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 where you don't even need to do that. And it's such an up tempo book where it's like you're done before you know it. Whereas this other one, I'm like, are we done yet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
See, like I'm honestly like that with almost all of them. I have to speed
mm,
them up. Like I used to not be able to listen to audiobooks. I just can't. Like if it's at a stately regular speed, my mind, even if I adore it, my
yeah, yeah,
mind just goes meow.
yeah, yeah,
Like, and then I'll be like driving and I'll be like, oh, this has been on for an hour. I've been
yeah.
plotting a book.
No, yeah,
But if I
totally.
put it on really, really fast, like two times speed or even more, like I have to listen to try to catch it. And it, for
Yeah.
some reason, makes me pay attention to it. And I actually really enjoy that. Like it's kind of fun. But this Southern girl, if they have like a British accent, sometimes I can't go that fast because I'm like, you're going really too quick for this gal.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do
yeah.
not know what you just said there. But
Yeah. Well, that's funny is like
anyway,
John Flanagan had he's British, so he had a British, narrator, and the guy like, and he just did such a good job. But it was like bam, bam, bam. And
Yeah.
he said, my wife, she goes, this is a pretty up tempo, I'm like, I know. I'm like, and
I
I
like
blew
it.
through. Yeah, I blew through like the 8.5 hours. I mean,
Yeah.
it just felt very consistent. Whereas the other one, I'm just so excited that my credit actually comes tomorrow, so I get book 2 now, so I can take a
All
break from
right.
the sci-fi. But I'm thinking now I'm just gonna have to do that because I just keep forgetting that you can do that. But yeah, that's a
Well,
really good
plus
suggestion.
I'm like, I don't know if you've done those Clifton Strength things that Becca Syme is always talking about. If you've heard Becca Syme's name battered about.
Yeah, I've heard it. I have not tried that yet, but yeah, I was just talking to
But
somebody else about that.
one of my top 5 is achiever. So I
Mm,
like to check things off a list. And
mm.
so listening to an audiobook really fast and getting it done is really like satisfying to my personality, which is really not the way you're supposed to enjoy things. But,
Yeah,
oh, well, there it is. Sometimes I like that.
yeah. That's fair. Well, I'm going to have to try that out. That actually sounds really interesting. I'll have to do that on my drive into work tomorrow. So there's that last one there. Do you have any promos, news, updates, or current projects that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, definitely. My book 2 in my duology comes out on July 31st. It's called Rise of the Fire Queen. The first book is Stolen by the Shadow King. So this is fantasy romance as well, written in the same world as my Kingdoms of Lore, but in the underworld. So it's loosely inspired by Hades and Persephone, because I have long been obsessed with that story.
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. So, and it's been interesting writing a duology. So I've not done that before. So it was a new, fresh, fun experience. And I really enjoyed it. So yeah, so July 31st, that comes out, and that will be complete.
Oh, that's awesome. That's super cool. I always thought I would just be like a trilogy person, and then now just so many authors I've talked to, I'm like, I could see myself doing a duology, or I could see myself doing, 5 books, or something like that. I'm like, kind of think a little bit more, now.
Well, it's
I
fun
feel
to
like a lot
try
of
new
people,
stuff too. Once you've been doing
yeah,
it for a little
exactly.
while,
Yeah,
keeps it
no,
fresh, keeps you on your
yeah,
toes.
yeah. I never thought I would do it years ago, and now I'm like really strongly considering like actually planning out this particular story for a duology, because I keep thinking, well, I don't have enough for 3 books, and I'm like, but they're going to be bigger, so I'm like, oh, that actually a duology would actually make a lot of sense. So
Yeah,
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 that's a really good idea. Well, that's exciting, that you got something, ready to go for the end of the month. I feel like
yeah.
it's a really good time. I know personally before school starts again, I always tend to buy a lot, in anticipation, once the school year gets busy, particularly on Kindle and Nook. Probably
Right, right.
because I just like to have them on my phone, so that when I'm at school,
Hmm.
I can just, in between
Read during lunch
things,
break or
yeah,
whatever.
or sometimes I sub, and it's like usually it's in study halls or something. So yeah, so that's really cool. Well, thank you so much, Alicia. It was a great time chatting with you. I'm so glad, again, like I said, that I could, connect with you on Facebook, from a
Thank you
like
so much
page,
for having me.
yeah,
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 thank you so much.
anytime.
It's been fun. I've enjoyed chatting with you.
Excellent, excellent. Well, if there's anything else I can do, to help you out, or, feel free to tag me in anything, send me anything, and, I'll put it anywhere. Just want to remind our audience to check out Alicia's, the links in the description. As per always, we just want to remind you, that, for Audible, for, Kindle, Nook, wherever, you're finding someone's book, just please make sure you're reviewing them, giving some sort of, feedback, things like that. I like this because of this. Otherwise it's kind of hard for people to find you with the algorithms, excuse me, particularly on Amazon and Kindle. So please make sure you do that. So they'll be there wherever this podcast is found, per usual. Like I said, Alicia, if there's anything else we can do to help you out, just email me, message me. If you have a great idea, or the Kickstarter, it's going really well, or you want to try and come back and have us help you with that, and promote that, just get a
I
hold of
would
me,
love
and
that. That would be
yeah,
great.
be more than happy to help you out in any way that we can. So
Awesome. Thank you so much.
yeah, not a problem. Well, Alicia, you have a great rest of the night, and I will, be sending you an email shortly, for your schedule and things like that, and we'll get your, episodes all posted, and keep you updated. So
Thank you. Good
excellent.
night.
Have a good rest of the night. Bye.